guys, how's it going? Icestar here and welcome back to another video. It's been a while since I've done a game review video, but what is different about this is that I'll be doing a very detailed review on Resident Evil Village that I played on my channel. This review is for just PC only. Now I did a brief one on Resident Evil Village after I has finished the game at the end of my Let's Play, but I never got a chance to just sit down and review it as a whole for this game. To warn you, for those who have not played / watched my Resident Evil Let's Play series, this video may not be for you because there will be a lot of spoilers that'll be there. Or if you haven't watched or played any of the Resident Evil Resident Evil Village at all, then this will also be a spoiler for you. So, spoiler alert. Anyway, there'll be 4 main categories I'll be covering in this review. It'll be game mechanics, lore, sounds, and compatibility. With those categories, I'll be unpacking in full detail my thoughts and how I felt as I was playing the game. Keep in mind, this is all within my opinions. It may not be 100% truth. Listen to my review at your own discretion. Anyway, now that I got that out of the way, let's get right into it. Game mechanics. I would like to first cover this area because it's one of the more easier topics to handle and manage. I will also using these subcategories to break down this so it'll be easier for both me and you guys to follow. First one being animations, second being type of game modes, and the third being resource management. Let's first start with the animations of the game. Since the game creator is Capcom, their style of game creation is what is expected to be developed and in par with the current level of gaming creation. The movements of Ethan and the other characters outside of it are overall pretty smooth. The way they attack, their walking, and opening and closing doors are constructed to be nothing disturbing to the eye and extremely smooth to catch. It's also natural how they created animations that seemingly match close to real life. This also speaks for the same for the animation of the environment. The natural growth of when the trees pop out of the animations of animals and trees swaying in the wind. I of course thought it is expected as much considering Capcom is a huge company that delivers many different kinds of games that they have to meet their quota. As for game mode, this is a single player game mode. It is done in first person and you're forced to view what Ethan sees through his vision. This can mean either whether looking down, forward, behind, or different sides. I personally find it pretty nice to be able to have this sort of game mode to play and how well they execute it for the purpose of a suspenseful yet thriller atmosphere that is mixed with action. I also appreciate the limited visuals that they add in the game to add to the dismal feeling. Finally, for resource management, Resident Evil Village falls back to how the mechanics of Resident Evil 4 are. There are limited ammo to get and weaponry throughout the single player mode story gameplay. You are forced to balance and your resources carefully to not overuse what you're given. In the beginning, you're only given a knife and a pistol to fight against the enemies. As you progress through the game, you gradually get more and more weaponry in order to survive and build yourself in battering back your opponents. The one thing I appreciate what they did in comparison to Resident Evil 4 is how they improved the mechanics, making animations of shooting, knifing, and other elements to be easier without having to struggle against janky animations and weird glitches. However, it still exuberates the feeling given by Resident Evil 4 through their limited ammo capacity and being in a cult village in the middle of nowhere. I only played the normal mode in Resident Evil Village, so I cannot state how the other harder modes function. I will say this though. Resident Evil Village has done their job in bringing back the Resident Evil 4 vibes of limited ammo and weapon capacity. Another part that I like is how they allow you to modify your guns and abilities to engage in a fight. They use the game's money currency to buy your upgrades, whether on weaponry, skills, or expanding your inventory. There is also a particular use of animal meat to boost your skill abilities, and this can help boost Ethan's base in terms of fighting. Lore. This will include these subcategories: story, characters, and character developments. So let's first start with the story. I'll save you the trouble of unpacking the story as most of you already know this and go straight to my thoughts. So here we go. There's really nothing much to say for the story. The creator has done a very good job in making the story very well rounded and extremely detailed. As with any Resident Evil story, they always have the beginning where things seem to be normal to the build-up where Ethan is then thrust into crazy mess that he ends up having to be dead and shapes the stories and leave players still wanting more of the lore, but also tying up some loose ends that they already built. It does answer questions of who Spencer is, and how things originate from the beginning of the Resident Evil series till present day, where Miranda, who lived as long as the era of the Spanish flu to try and revive her daughter, back through the use of the megamycete, but in a twisted and psychotic manner. It also builds to Chris's side of the story, where we learn what he has been doing in the past after the whole time after Resident Evil 6 and the chaos that's happening. I also appreciate that they kept the more horror and thriller elements there than action-like, unlike Resident Evil 6. However, if I have to say about a criticism there, is that they kept the vibes of Resident Evil 4 a little bit too similar, where the infection takes place in a rural village and there's a cult happening. The slight miss of creativity there could have been slightly improved if the cult were to happen elsewhere other than the village. It could perhaps be interesting to happen in a small city, and trying to continue the thread there would perhaps bring more interesting growth and different scenes to the story. But what is different for this is how there are 4 families ruling the village under Miranda, and that there is a much deeper root to the issue than simply saving Rose and getting her out of the village. In the end, there's also heroism, and ends up having the main protagonist making a sacrificial death. Unlike the other Resident Evil games where the main protagonist remains living, the main protagonist said is physically dead and a new story is about to happen. I'd admit I was fairly sad to seeing Ethan die, but I like how the creators used that to carry a deeper connection and love towards the main protagonist. I think it's clever of them to show that the lore of Resident Evil evolves more than just a few key characters that never dies. Overall, the story plot is fairly well written. Next is the characters. We are introduced to many new characters in the game, aligned with old characters. In this video, I will only cover the ones that I think are very relevant to the story. The main character you play is as Ethan, which is done in first-person perspective. However, there's a momentary moment where you get to play as Chris as he's introduced back to the story. There's also Mia, Miranda, and the 4 different families. Leia, Dimitrescu, Morel, Denevito, and Heisenberg. You also meet Rose as a baby. However, at the extra cutscene in the game, we also see Rose as a younger teenager and grown up because of the megamycete. There's also the introduction of the different types of monsters in the game you encounter. Now, I do not know the exact names we will call them, but they're ones where Ethan will have to battle constantly in order to keep them from being eaten. In this character section, I'll briefly talk about the background of each character and my opinions of them. The first is the main character, Ethan. He came from Resident Evil 7 where he was once dead, quote unquote dead, but is brought back to life via the megamycete by the Baker family. He was brought in as part of the family. Ethan also meets with Mia, and he puts his effort to getting her back to normal. Of course, once Mia and Ethan escape, we are brought to the present of the game. Now, my opinion of Ethan. I like how the game creator used the growth and evolution of his character to push through the game. He began clueless of what's going on and bothered by the previous events in Louisiana with the Baker family. However, as he got to the deeper issue of what is happening, and how the 4 families grew so interested in him along with Miranda, his realization of his body crumbling and unable to survive brought him to sacrifice himself to destroy the last traces of Miranda, twisted experience in the village. I can see from Ethan's perspective that he values saving his daughter and Mia more above anything else, and that he wanted them to live, disregarding his life in general. Some interesting way shows the male heroism, but opens up more possibilities for Rose to take up whatever his father left him to do. Another thought to note is how Ethan's use of the gun is more professionally trained compared to Resident Evil 7. This is also the same as how he handles the rifle, shotgun, and grenade launcher. This indicates that Ethan was military trained before the events of Resident Evil Village. That small attention to detail is nice and expands the creator's attempt to give Ethan more growth to his character and maturity. His maturity further develops as his awareness of what is happening grows. Overall, Ethan's character and development was good, and I really like how the game creators worked on him. There's obviously small criticisms I can make, but it's nothing that bothers me overall. Next is Chris Redfield. Now, his segment of playing is small, so huge importance to the story. For most of the game, Chris is seen as this character of slight ominous nature with secrets to hold for himself. He never truly tells Ethan any answers and warns him to not interfere. There's an interesting dark side of him to his character, But it's not until he reveals his true reasons that Chris' ominous nature began to be lifted, and reveals a more deeper undertone of what is truly happening. During the part where the player gets to play as Chris, he exposes the root cause of the experimentations and the truth of the Megamycete. The player also sees the cattle, which is the root for many of the changes in the environment and increase of power from the creature. The player also learns that Chris now has his own team and to end whatever means with the bioweapons that are created. This is another evolution of Chris's character where he goes against the nature of the bioweapons created and uses his own now built team to stop anything evolving further into an ugly mess. Although I do admit it was a bit sudden when Chris tells him that the full situation closer towards the end. If he could have been less mysterious in the beginning, making the players think he might be truly behind some part of it, it would have indicated some hint that Chris is an ally than an enemy. This is further hinted when Chris shot quote-unquote Mia and making Ethan think that he was being betrayed by Chris. Of course that wasn't the case, but it was almost a 180 turn that made it a little hard to swallow in my opinion. I wish they worked on Chris a little bit more to be less darker in tone, but still holds elements of Chris from Resident Evil 6. Of course, I do like a more cynical side of him since his older years did make him have that tone. It shows his character growth. Next is Mia. Now Mia has a much smaller role to play in this game than that of Resident Evil 7. However, her significance still has proven monumental and important. She is first seen in the cutscene when Chris discovers her in a cell where Miranda held her and disguises herself as Mia at the very beginning of the game. She then reveals secrets of what had happened. The next time we see her is when she is in the plane with Chris, demanding what happened to her husband. Chris then confesses that Ethan has sacrificed himself to save him and Mia to escape out of the area after the bomb exploded. Now I really love Mia's character, and how there's a shift and new perspective compared to Resident Evil 7. With Rose, she has care for in the role of her mother. She is then overseeing her baby and also Ethan too as her husband. I think in this particular game I appreciate her appearances where it mattered despite it not being the real Mia, and giving Ethan more confidence to get Rose back. The ending reveal where the real Mia shows up is very impactful too, since this ties some strings of what happened to the real Mia and Miranda kidnapped her for experiments. All in all, I love her. Next is Miranda, and on the village was called Mother Miranda. She is the main antagonist to the story. She's first seen in disguise as Mia, with Ethan where Rose was. We see the next instance where she is discussing among the four families leaders how to deal with Ethan. We eventually see her after the fight with Heisenberg and finally the final boss battle. Miranda is certainly an interesting antagonist. I personally felt partially bad for her, mainly for the fact that she wanted to get her daughter back to life. She would do anything no matter how twisted it is. The act she did eventually led her to a path of evil. It is an unfortunate fall of an original purpose gone wrong. Still, I like the surprise and the well-written lore of her backstory. Now the four family leaders, I won't go too much into detail, as they all serve the purpose of being challenges and obstacles to lead Ethan to his goal in saving Rose. I think the creators have done a very good job in character design. Each were inspired by some myth and background. Certainly not boring, and that's an intro to the experience one gets when encountering each household. Lady Dimitrescu with survival from vampires style at home with three ladies that are her daughters, then Morel and the water at the river, then Benevito with the hunt to survival with no weapons, and finally Heisenberg with machines built for killing and hunting. Even each boss battle handle against the four gives it a different feel. Definitely compared to Resident Evil 4, you will deal with much more complex political hierarchy with simpler idea to start. The four families is what uniquely is different from their inspirational ideas. Overall, the characters created made the story engaging and certainly one that has never dull moments. Finally, we will cover character development. I think the only one I can think of as evident for character development involving is Ethan, the main character. He's shown grown the most. A once typical human to be infected with the Megamycete, to being a hero and willing to stay behind to bomb the village, explains to me how much it took before Ethan grew to the point where he's seen respected and remembered. I think it's clever of the creators to use a seemingly normal human being to take on a heroism route after all he's been through. I think the rest change a little to what has evolved to major character developments. Next part is sounds. This is pretty self-explanatory. The sound effects created were in sync and to the point where the scene is happening. It makes you feel as though you're with Ethan and in a world life-like settings. The soundtrack, I believe, there is barely any music to the background. I don't blame him, as fits with what the creators had in mind. Next is compatibility. Now this one is where I struggle and probably will have to say a little bit more. I'll say the compatibility is designed for newer high-end softwares. The reason why I say that is because of how much it uses to run the game. It can still run at lower end softwares to some extent. On the computer build I had for mine, it was able to run the game fine at the lowest of settings. For most people who want to play the game and just to see the story, that is completely fine if you bear with the lowest settings. However, those who want to run the game at max settings, the software built on even at the most high-end game computers may not able to max it out. Still, it shows a little bit enough depth and flexibility to encourage people who want to play the game to do so. Of course, if you play a console like the PS4, PS5, or Xbox Series X and S, then probably it shouldn't concern you as much. The console game engines will handle perfectly. However, for those who want to simply enjoy the fun in the PC with good quality graphics, it might cost a hefty amount of money in order to achieve that accomplishment to that level. All in all, I will say compatibility for Resident Evil Village can have its limits for user friendliness, mainly on the PC level. My final thoughts. Overall, Resident Evil Village is certainly a game that is very good in story, lore, character development, and sound quality and graphics. It is a very lovable game and brings back the vibes horror mix of action that Resident Evil has done a very good job in drawing the borders. Obviously, it has some references to Resident Evil 4 in terms of game mechanics, but I like the more in-depth story it brought to us and made it engaging to enjoy with. If I were to ever play this again, I probably would after some time, but certainly not anytime soon. Anyway, this is my in-depth review of the Resident Evil Village. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, if you like what I'm doing, please hit the like button, and if you're new here and want to see more, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell as well. If you have any comments or thoughts on your own for this video, please leave it down in the comment section down below. I'll try to do more videos in the future of this level. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye now!